Today's lecture is about economic growth. What do we mean by economic growth? Well, when you hear that the economy is growing, it means that we have an increase in output. We are producing more goods and services than we did the previous year. It is going to be measured from quarter to quarter on a yearly basis. So since we are looking at the output, then it is going to be the GDP, or the percentage increase in GDP, that is going to give us the information as to how fast or how slowly we are growing. It is also going to refer to the success that we have had in guiding our economy, in using our resources in the most efficient way. And economists would like to know which one of the components of GDP, was it C, consumers, investors, government, or net exports, that are the driving force behind the increase in output. If we were to look at a graphical representation of economic growth, we could show that using a production possibility curve. So if this used to be your production possibility right now, when we show growth, this was good A and this was good B, we will move out and therefore show that we are able to produce more of both. Another graphical representation of economic growth could be the movement out of your aggregate supply curve. So if this is your aggregate supply, then moving it out means we are able to supply more. So why is it that economic growth is so important for the analysis of an economy? Actually, economic growth is going to be the focus for the whole semester. Well, the first thing, the most obvious, is the fact that as the economy is growing, we are producing more, therefore we are hiring more workers, more people, and therefore there is an increase in jobs. Well, as there is an increase in jobs, there's also an increase in income because more people are making more money or earning more money, which would also imply that poverty should be going down, at least absolute poverty, not relative poverty, which is something that we will always have. Beside that, the standard of living is going to be going up because now that you have a job and that you are earning more money and that as a whole the economy is producing more goods to share, then our standard of living is going to be going up. Through economic growth in our country, we can also impact economic growth in other countries, and that would be done through trade. If the United States is growing fast, then we're going to be producing, actually we are going to be producing and consuming what we are producing, but beside that, since our incomes are so high, we will also be demanding goods produced by other countries. And as we import more from those countries, we will by the same token be creating more jobs in those economies, and as a result their incomes would be going up. We will also create a much more interrelated community of countries, which will promote a friendly relationship, because you would not want to be on bad terms with a country that is buying from you or that is supplying you with certain raw materials. So these would be the main reasons why we would like to see economic growth. Now, how fast would we want the economy to grow? Well, we don't want it to grow too fast and we don't want it to grow too slowly. So for the US economy, a mature economy, a well-developed economy, we're looking at between 2 and 4%. Now, this is going to change depending on the business cycle on the part of the business cycle that you are in. It will change because of innovation or increases in productivity or technological innovation. But generally speaking, we don't want to grow at below 2%. And we do not really want to grow for long term over 4%. If we grow too slowly, then we are not creating enough jobs for people entering the labor force. And that would mean that unemployment would be going up. If, on the other hand, we are growing too fast, That means that there is going to be a shortage of certain raw materials, a shortage of qualified labor, and as a result, the price of those resources will be going up, which will be transmitted into higher prices for those goods and services, which means inflation, and that's bad too. So we would like to grow at a rate of between 2 and 4%. The next thing we're going to look at are what are the sources of economic growth. Generally speaking, we could divide the sources of economic growth between quantitative and qualitative. Now, quantitative sources simply mean that we have more resources. So there are two ways that we could grow, either because we have more workers or more land, or because we have better workers, more qualified workers, more efficient workers. And both combine to give us economic growth. So if we look historically speaking, you will see that up to roughly World War II, most of the economic growth of the United States was due to the quantitative sources, and that means more people coming in, more immigration, more land to be used for farming. And only after World War II did we see more of a qualitative emphasis, and that would be an improvement in productivity, output per worker. If we're looking at the quantitative sources of economic growth, labor is going to be the main focus. So how can we have more workers in the economy? The most obvious would be from a population growth. Our population has slowed down to a growth of about 1.5%. Most developed countries have a slower population growth. Some countries like Italy, for instance, have a negative population growth, which would mean that there are more people who are dying than people who are being born. So that kind of limits us as to how fast we could grow quantitatively. Now, the participation rate, not everybody who could be in the labor force is. We have about 6, maybe 6.5 million people who are of working age, but who are not interested in participating in the labor force. Remember, they're not even part of the labor force. So we could encourage them. Maybe if salaries are high enough, then those people will be willing to enter the labor force. Immigration is another source of increased labor. People come in with H-1 visas. Well, we also know that we have about 12 million people who are here illegally and who are working, but of course unofficially in most cases. And outsourcing would be one more way whereby you could increase the amount of workers without actually having them physically come into the country. We're going to be talking more about outsourcing later on, but you can imagine that because of technology, you could have somebody in Bangalore, India, or in Moscow, Russia, or Romania, which is even cheaper, write programs because they have the education, they have what we call the human capital, and through the use of technology, because they can email and they can send fax, all that information, they could be working on a program and being paid a fraction of what an American worker would be paid, mainly because there is a difference in the cost of living. So this would be the quantitative part. And roughly, we would see a growth of 1.5%. So how about the qualitative? Well, qualitative is going to be affected by technology to a large extent. And we have seen a very sharp increase in the productivity, because when you think qualitative, you're going to be looking at productivity. Productivity. And that would mean output per worker. So because of skills, because of technology, because of machinery and equipment, you are able to produce more per worker. What is this going to do, the qualitative aspect, to the working environment? Well, it is going to increase efficiency. We're going to be able to produce more per worker. Work is becoming less physically demanded, and therefore there's going to be less discrimination, because a male and a female could use a forklift as efficiently. Of course, if it was a question of carrying heavy loads, then we could say that a man would have more strength than a woman. Okay, in general. Leisure, there's going to be more leisure if there is more qualitative improvements in the resources. And then keep in mind that productivity rates have changed at different speeds. So if you have an innovation in technological innovations and there is more IT input into the workplace, then you could see that productivity or qualitative improvements are going to be going up much faster. It is also different for different countries. If you're looking at productivity increases of less developed countries, then you will see that their productivity increases are very strong, because we're looking at very low productivity before the use of technology, and therefore a small increase in one or two machines will show a very large percentage increase in productivity or output per worker. So what is going to influence the growth in productivity, the speed with which productivity is going to be growing? You have technology and tools. Being able to use a word processor is going to allow you to type so many more pages than you did with a manual typewriter or an electric typewriter. And of course, with a word processor, it's going much faster, and you're able to produce many more or type many more pages. Education and training, well, if you have the tools, you have to be able to use those tools efficiently. And through education and training, you're also allowing for creativity, for ways, for different ways of using those resources that you have. Innovation is going to be a result of a combination of education and technology. If people are motivated, then they're going to be working harder, and as a result, that will improve productivity. Motivation could be financial, getting bonuses, or days off, a shorter work week, or a different combination of days off and days at work. Management. If workers are able to participate in management decisions, then they are going to be much more willing to work harder and therefore improve productivity. They will feel that they are useful, that they are important to the company. Benefits, just like bonuses, motivation, benefits would be one of them. If you're going to have medical and dental, that of course is also reflected in how much the company you feel cares about you. Other company policies, time away for the summer, or a lighter schedule, or time sharing for parents who are taking care of their children or their elderly parents. That's another problem that many of the young people are going to be faced with. Daycare and gym, that's another thing. If a company is going to be making available a gym on the premises, then people are going to be they're going to be more motivated to work harder because their health will have improved. The same goes for your daycare. Now, which do you think is the most important of those? You can come up with many more, but these kind of summarize most of the elements that are going to improve productivity. So think about that. Which would you say is the number one element that is going to improve productivity? And also, you should be able to explain how else Maybe you can give your own personal examples or give examples of how you have been faced with improvements in productivity in your place of work as a result of any of those or anything else that you may want to add to our discussion. So another element that is going to be important is to create a good environment, business environment, so that the economy can grow faster. One of the more important ones would be the legal framework. We have to have reliance on contracts, because if you don't believe that the people you are getting into a business deal with are going to abide by your contract, then you are going to be looking only at the short-term relationships between you and other companies, and that's not what is going to give strong economic growth. We want people to know that the legal environment is going to be making the contracts solid and valid long term. Social, cultural, and political environment is also important. We have to look at work in positive light. It is something that has a personal reward, not only financial reward. The other thing would be the tax system. How can you influence and reward, for instance, investments? How can you reward hard work? So you should not be taxing it too high or too heavily, because if this is the case, then you're going to be discouraging both work and investment. The government should also give some incentives for research and development. You could get subsidies for working on new projects. Innovation should be backed, and research and development kind of feeds on each other. One company develops one product, another company develops another product that complements. They work together. A third company is going to be coming up with something that is going to be a result of those two inventions. And one of the more important things is that we have to stress the benefits of the market system. The market system rewards hard work, and this is what we would like to see. And this would be the best allocation of resources. Now, best does not mean the most equitable. It does not mean fair. It does not mean just. Best in economics is going to be most efficient. And efficient means we're going to have the fewest shortages and fewest surpluses as a result of the market system in general. So we looked at the population growth, and we looked at productivity growth. And since we would like to see a growth of about 2 to 4%, given that our population growth is of only 1.5%, then we would need about 1.5% increase in productivity, so that both together would give us an economic growth of about 3%. Okay, now we have had a 1% to 1.5% increase in productivity for a number of years. In the late 90s, our productivity growth jumped to almost 5%, 4 to 5, almost 5%. Can you think of why? What happened in the late 90s for our productivity to grow so fast? Remember the elements that we discussed, the elements that would influence productivity. So now, are there any negative consequences to economic growth? Yes, but these negative consequences are relatively small as compared to the benefits from economic growth. One of the main negatives is going to be pollution. We don't know how to produce goods without producing bads, and bads would be air pollution, water pollution, congestion, the use of infrastructure. So the answer to how can economic growth, although it produces pollution, actually also work in reducing the total amount of pollution that we are going to be able to deal with, will be, on the one hand, we know that as the economy grows, there's going to be more money on research and development, and we are going to be able to find better, cleaner ways of producing goods and services. Furthermore, with economic growth, society is going to become more sensitive to the environment. We're going to be leaving more large areas for parks, for national parks, so as to give us a nicer environment. Yes, some of the consequences of inflation could be materialism. And not everybody is happier with a bigger house or a bigger car or more stuff. And of course, when the economy continues to grow, we are going to be running out of resources. What we could do, though, is use alternate resources and shift to maybe less polluting ways of production. Right now, because we are trying to be more independent from imports of oil, we are trying to use or trying to harness more of the natural aspects of energy. We would like to see more hydroelectric power, more solar power, and so on and so forth. So economic growth is the subject of most of our class this semester, macroeconomics class. It's got good sides and it's got some negative sides, but overall we would like to say that economic growth has more positives than it has negatives, and many of those negatives can also be managed and maybe circumvented by the benefits from economic growth. Thank you.